So today my talk is called Pickleball Buddhist. And I did that purposely to give everybody kind of a teaser, this kind of a catchy title. What does that mean? So what is a Pickleball Buddhist? We'll explore that. We're going to come back to that question in a little while, but first I want you to look at someone who is not a Pickleball Buddhist. So there is my mother on the left side, Masako Hamada, and her best friend Sachi Ochiai, two of my most important teachers here at OCBC. And I'm actually going to talk a little bit about both of them. But first, we're going to focus on Masako on the left side. Has always been totally dedicated to the Buddha Dharma. It was an important part of her background through her father's experience, who came to Shinjin Awakening he was in his 30s. And it was when my mother was, 1 or 2, very, very young in her life. But it influenced her and her families for the rest of their lives. So her background included having her father send her and her sister and brother to Japan. She was 14 at the time. And my grandfather thought it was so important to be able to hear and listen and read about the Buddha Dharma that he sent his children back to Japan so that they would learn how to read and write Japanese, because there was nothing in English at that time about Shin Buddhism. And he felt that it was that important for them to be able to access the teachings through all of the Japanese books that were available. As you know or may not know, Shin Buddhism has been in Japan for over 800 years. And it's been in Japan since the 6th century. So there's a lot of literature and things written about Buddhism. In America, Buddhism had only been there for, at that point, 50 years, maybe, not even, 30 years. Buddhism came to the shores of the west coast of California in 1899. So at the time my mother was sent to Japan in 1938, it hadn't been there. It hadn't even been 40 years yet that Shin Buddhism had been in America. So she was raised with this very dedicated focus on the Buddha Dharma. For her, it was really important to have what we call a Shinjin Awakening. She spent time with Buddhist teachers and even stayed at my grandfather's sensei's home in Kyoto so that she could try to achieve this incredible goal of awakening. So for her, Buddhism was the centerpiece or the backbone of her life. So in her mind, everyone needed to be a serious Buddhist. And so her idea of being a serious Buddhist was someone who came to the temple on Sundays, or someone who attended, this would be today, someone who Zooms BCA, continuing Buddhist education courses, goes to seminars and retreats, takes OCBC Buddhist education courses, visits the Jodo Shinshu Center for conferences and workshops in Berkeley, attends memorial services, reads books on Buddhism, volunteers to help at the temple, and is a paid member and donates regularly. Very important. So my mom had this kind of orientation, and that's what I grew up with, this very serious person who kind of lived and breathed the Dharma. And so she had no time for what she considered not serious Buddhists. So let's turn back to this question. What is a pickleball Buddhist? And basically, it's a metaphor for an entire category of people we might call social Buddhists or non-serious Buddhists. I picked that title because I thought it would be somewhat intriguing. I'm not going to specifically talk about pickleball or pickleball Buddhists, but it encompasses kind of this entire category of people who maybe aren't so much into learning about the teachings the way my mother wanted people to learn about it. And what does that mean for all of us? Because there are very few people like my mother, and she tried to instill a love of the Dharma in all of her children, and she did such a bad job of it that my 3 siblings never wanted to do anything with Buddhism. She would buy all the books that ever came out in English, which there were many over the years, and so everybody accumulated this library of Buddhist books that they never read. She would go to seminars and make copies of all of the handouts and give everyone a little folder with all of the teachings and things that she learned. And of course, no one ever opened those things or read anything. So her style of Buddhism was a hard one to follow. It was kind of a lot of pressure. And I was somewhat receptive. I thought that there were things that were valuable. And she did plant some seeds. And so I was gone from Buddhism, many of you know, for about 25 years. I actually attended a Catholic church for 15 years because my husband is Catholic, and we raised our boys in the Catholic church that was 1 mile from our house. OCBC is 22 miles away, and it was easier just to go to the Catholic church. But at one point in my 50s, I decided I wanted to come back to OCBC. And I came back to be a serious Buddhist. And what I found here was exactly what I needed. There were BEC classes, Buddhist education classes, that Reverend Harada had started in about 2000. And so I attended every BEC class I could. I was just hungry for learning more about this. There was something in my life that was somewhat unfulfilled, and I came back to OCBC with this idea of I needed to find what was not quite there. By all accounts, we had a wonderful family. My husband and I got along well. Tom's, if any of you know him, he's a delightful human being, quirky and very funny, but there was something that I needed to get, and I actually, in February retreat, I would go with my mother and Sachi and some other members of OCBC. I would attend Dr. Haneda's summer retreat up in Berkeley with them. Jim and Janice here who are both minister's assistants, would attend too. In fact, they would drive Sachi and my mother because they had trouble flying in the airplanes. So I did many things. I had monthly meditation sessions in my home for 3 years. And Linda Turner came up with the idea of establishing a Buddhist Education Center book club. So that was up and thriving. We met and talked about Buddhist books. And I joined the BEC steering committee. Reverend Harada asked me to be an MA because he said it would deepen my study. So that was kind of the hook. It wasn't so much that I wanted to help you so much, but it was a way for me to learn more, right? It was a very selfish motive on my part. And then eventually I enrolled at the Institute of Buddhist Studies, and then, lo and behold, I followed this path to ordination, which I never in my wildest dreams would have ever anticipated. I think back now, I think my grandfather would be very pleased and surprised, that I followed this path. I mean, it was nothing I ever expected would happen. But along the way, I ventured into more of the non-serious side of the temple. So I I saw these incredibly hardworking women in the BWA, which now has men, and I joined, or was asked to join the OCBC board. These things aren't directly, Dharma related. I joined ABBA. I started to teach a high school Dharma class. And then I found myself helping at festivals and rolling sushi and running teriyaki chicken and baking cookies and making mochi. I helped with replacement of 300 pieces of furniture that was donated by a corporation when we were doing our remodel, and collected donations for things like bingo and golf tournaments, supported the Earth Day eco and clothing drives, and then we even donated a car. So I came to appreciate a broader view of the Buddhist path, one that I had a prejudice against, because my mom would always say about someone, they're just social, and she'd kind of put her nose up. And I grew up with that attitude. I'd heard that my whole life. There's the real Buddhists, and then there's the social Buddhists. And there was like kind of this division between the two. But let's look at this. So in our service book is something called the Bodhisattva Vows, and there's 2 of them. And number 2 says, "The many beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Greed, hatred, and ignorance rise endlessly. I vow to abandon them. Dharma gates are countless. I vow to wake to them. Buddha's way is unsurpassed. I vow to embody it fully." Okay, I would like to focus on these 2 lines. Dharma gates are countless. I vow to wake to them. So this is something that's part of the Bodhisattva vows. And if you don't know what a Bodhisattva is someone who wants to become a Buddha. So they follow a Bodhisattva path to eventually attain Buddhahood. So within this vow is this idea that you kind of do these things. And the line that I really focused on was, Dharma gates are countless. I vow to wake to them. Dharma gates are an entry point into Buddhism. Shinran talks about necessary provisional steps to true awakening. And then we have this person, Reverend Harada, had the insight to see all of the OCBC activities as Dharma gates. He correctly focused on our Sangha as the key to those gates. He primarily really emphasized education. He founded the Buddhist Education Center. It started in 2000. I did my IBS thesis based on the Buddhist Education Center history. I chronicled what the BEC did for 20 years. And they put together over that time over 300 classes. And it was a tremendous learning environment for anyone who seriously wanted to learn more about Buddhism. But there were other opportunities in numerous ways, and you'll be able to see visually just how many things we have at OCBC that allow Sangha members to interact, to come together, and it's a perfect embodiment of the idea of interconnection and of dana giving, because the people that come to OCBC to help, to join in the various organizations, to do the things that happen here, it is almost brings me to tears sometimes at how hard I see people working and caring about what goes on here. So, we know we have the 3 treasures, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The Buddha represents all of our teachers. And Amita here, who's in the middle of, on our main altar on the Naijin, is a metaphor for awakening, for truth, for enlightenment, for wisdom and compassion. The Dharma are the teachings that we have received from all of our Buddhist teachers, and they include the people that we know, like Reverend Harada and all the senseis who come, and all the Dharma school teachers who impart information to our Dharma school children. But Dharma teachers are everywhere. The Dharma is everywhere. And then, of course, the Sangha is the community of all of us together. And according to Dr. Haneda, and I'm kind of paraphrasing because I don't have his exact words, but he has said numerous times, of the three, Sangha is the most important. And I totally agree, because without Sangha, what good is the Buddha? What good is the Dharma? The Sangha is the way that the three treasures are manifested and embodied in life, and hopefully on an everyday basis. So, the distinction between being a serious Buddhist and a social Buddhist is a false choice. Reverend Turner likes to present lots of false choices. You get an either-or situation, and it isn't. We are both, because we are all part of the Sangha. So I think we should look at it more in terms of a continuum. On one hand, we have people like my mother who are like aggro. In fact, my dad used to think she was a fanatic. And he would say, "Don't be such a fanatic about this." And my dad was more way on this other side. He was more donate plants for the temple Buddhist. He was more, let's put a sprinkler system in for the temple Buddhist. Let's give a donation to the temple. I don't think he really came to very many of our Sunday meetings. But he considered himself a good Buddhist. And I think what happens is that the Dharma, Buddhism, permeates all the activities that we do here at this temple. The hope is that through the interactions that we have with each other, through the connections, the way that we help each other, the teachings do come out of the examples. We are providing tremendous examples for our Dharma school children. In fact, at our last board meeting, a group of former high school students who are now in college are proposing to establish a YABA, which stands for Young Adult Buddhist Association. And their target is the 20 to early 30s group, because right now that's kind of a void in most temples. They go off to college, they kind of get involved with their careers and other things, but this group wants to come back and to start a YABA group that they hope will expand to, in fact, Sarah, you're right there. She's one of the people that came and presented at the board meeting. And that, I think, is an example of the seeds that were planted when they were here at OCBC as young children, and all the way through Dharma School and Dharma Wheel and Sangha teams and Junior YBA. They were able to carry this feeling of the Dharma within them that they want to also encourage and to build with their peers. And I think it's a tremendous testament to how successful that we have been. What Reverend Harada realized and understood is that you can't have Dharma in a void. You have to have community, you have to have activities, you have to have reasons for people to want to be here. And I think that's the reason why I can say this, I think, pretty reassuringly. We are the most successful temple in the BCA because people want to be here. There are so many ways that we all can connect with each other. And hopefully, through example, through working together, you're coming to understand, at least on a visceral level, just what it means to be Buddhist, to be caring and kind and generous and loving to each other. And I see that so much in so much of what all of us do. So earlier we read, here is the Pure Land. Here is the Pure Land is here. I smile in mindfulness and dwell in the present moment. The Buddha is seen in an autumn leaf. The Dharma is a floating cloud. The Sangha body is everywhere. My true home is right here. And that's the feeling that we want everyone who comes to our temple to feel. And I think we are pretty successful at that. So there isn't a dichotomy or a difference between the serious Buddhists and the social or the non-serious Buddhists. I think we are all on a continuum. I would hope that the ones that are just doing more of the social things will, kind of migrate to maybe coming to service or, some other things that are a little bit more teaching oriented. But the fact that they're here is, I think, really important. And I think we do a very good job of making people feel like they belong here. So, again, I bring up this picture of these two women, and I think in some ways, the woman on the right, Sachi Ochiai, embodied more of that idea of the Buddhist teachings being in everything that we do. Sachi's one who was a Dharma school teacher forever. She was in book club. She went to lots of BEC classes, and she and my mother went to practically every retreat and BEC class that you can imagine. They were like the Mutt and Jeff of BEC. But Sachi also incorporated a lot of these other things. And I'm not saying that my mother didn't. I mean, she was a member of BWA, and she worked really hard in everything that she participated in. But Sachi, I think, imbued more of this feeling that everything matters. And I think all of us can feel very good about what we have here and the ways that we reach out to each other and care for each other. So I'm going to share with you some photos, 5 photos of some of our other forms of Buddhism. So here's the pickleball group. And I started playing pickleball with my husband maybe 5 or 6 months ago. And I'm seeing all these people I'd never seen before. And I'm introducing myself, and my husband has gone crazy with pickleball, loves it. And he goes to Tustin besides us, but he's at OCBC twice a week, and he's helping set up, taking down. He's like Mr. Everything. So when I come, and I don't come that often because I take care of my mom on Wednesdays, so I don't come on the Wednesday date. And so I introduce myself, and I'm Tom Crane's wife. And, I just say, hi, I'm Ellen Crane, and they're very nice, and they have no idea who I am. And I think that's fine. That's totally fine. But I think I feel good for my husband that he's, creating this whole network of people that know him, not as Reverend Crane's husband. So anyways, that's been great. And it's made him feel much more comfortable here at the temple, and he's meeting new people. So we had, just a couple weeks ago, Project Kokoro did their Kazoku no Hi. The gym was packed, 300 people in there of all ages. They had stations all around the edges of the gym floor with activities for young and old. This picture on the left of a blackjack table was hilarious. We have 2 of our seniors, Mr. Ogata and Mr. Ando, and Ken Nishida is dealing them cards, and he's letting them win every time. He's like checking what cards they have and what they need, so he like pulls cards from under the deck. So they're amassing piles of chips, and they're having just the best time. They stayed there the whole time. It was hilarious. But they had all these other fun activities for the children, and we had live music. I mean, it was wonderful. And then just last week, a group went to the Terasaki Budokan. Came from OCBC. We had a group photo at the end, and we were there to support the Terasaki Budokan, and some of us went to Chinese food or beforehand at Paul's Kitchen, which that's Fujishige said, it's a dive, and she was right. But the food was good, and the stand-up comedy was a little edgy. Wasn't rated R, but it was not PG. So anyways, it was very interesting. And then just last week, we had the appreciation picnic over at Clark Park. Yes. Yeah, Ralph B. Clark Park anyway, so we had several hundred people there, and they had all kinds of games and activities and really fun things for the family to do. And then just last night, Friday night, I was here to teach a Padmasanga class to some scouts, both Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts. But the Girl Scouts had a investiture, and there were like 150 people here for the investiture. So there's all of these things going on here, and this is just a small sample of things that happened just like in the last few weeks. So the takeaway for this talk are these two things. Dharma gates are countless, and that Sangha is the most important treasure. So if you remember these two facts, then my message will have gotten to you. And we should be very grateful that we are here. Please join me in Gassho. Namo Amida Butsu, Naman Dabutsu, Naman Dabutsu, Naman Dabutsu.